Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to my podcast and radio show, William Wallace for America. Of course, I am William Wallace. And with me today is John Maher. He's an attorney in Chicago, but a whole lot more. There's no way to give you the whole big old long introduction right now because our time is really precious. Because when you hear some of the things that I got to hear off camera and you hear about this gentleman, what he's doing, his passion for our country while he's helping our veterans. It's just a simplistic way of saying it that's going to be developed throughout this interview that I think after hearing it, you're going to feel more passionate about our veterans. You're going to feel more passionate about the people that are trying to help them. And hopefully you're going to feel more passionate about our country to be able to get involved and do some things. John, thank you so much for coming on with me. I really appreciate it.
Bill, good afternoon, sir. It's a pleasure to be here. I've heard wonderful things about your program and its reach, and it's my sincere pleasure to be with you and your listenership and your viewership.
Thank you very much. I tell you, I found out about you because there's some passionate people and passionate parents that are worried about their veterans, and people who've listened to my show know that I've done a lot of work with the veterans. But you're the actual attorney that's helping these guys. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It's correct in a large measure. I'm part of the teams of attorneys. I lead the teams of
Okay.
attorneys and paralegals and investigators and doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists and forensic examiners that we marshal these cases. And if I could just take a step back a little bit, Bill,
Sure.
everyone in our law firm, there's six of us. We're all throughout the world, headquartered in Chicago, Washington, D.C., Charlotte, North Carolina. We have an office or presence in Texas and in Germany, and we're able to reach internationally. Idea being, all of us were former active duty prosecutors in the Army and the Air Force. Then we became defense counsel. And this is back in the late 90s. I was commissioned in the Army in the 1st Infantry Division in 1997, the Big Red One. And we were taught differently in the Army JAG school about fair play. We were taught that a prosecutor in the military wears two hats. The first hat is the white hat
Yeah.
of, do you have a case? Because not only is that an American over there that we're looking at and investigating, but that's a person who's not only an American presumed innocent under the Constitution until proven guilty, but also that's an American soldier. So we made sure, wearing the white hat, that the evidence did lead before we put this person through any trial and his or her family through all the saga of trial, confinement, appeal, and probation, parole, release, that whole process into society. Before we did that, you made sure that the evidence could prove that this is the actual person who did a bad thing and needs to go away. Then, once you've made that initial determination wearing your white hat, you switch to the advocate's hat. Now you've got a client, and your client is the United States. And in every court martial that I prosecuted, 42 of them to jury verdict, and then on appeal, probably 25 on active duty. And since then, 25 years ago, several hundred on appeal. The idea being, once you have the case and you know that's your guy or your gal, then you pursue it because now you're on behalf of the people of the United States. While we got into this business was with the Clint Lawrence case in 2014. And briefly, by way of background, Clint
And he was
Lawrence,
pardoned. He was pardoned by Trump, right?
yes,
Yeah.
President Trump pardoned him, and I'd love to tell that story. It's a highlight of a legal career in my estimation. What do they say on texts? In my humble opinion, MIMHO. Um,
Yeah.
and Clint Lawrence, 82nd Airborne, 2012 in July in Kandahar province in a combat infantry patrol, working his platoon through a minefield, was taken upon by three riders on a single motorcycle. One of the members of the platoon shouted out, "Hey, threat, they're not stopping, they're approaching our platoon," and requested permission to fire, but missed. Lawrence was below a 6 to 8 foot berm, great berms you have to navigate
You're
through
right.
this particular area of Afghanistan in the Zaray district, which is the hotbed of the Taliban and the birthplace of the Taliban. He was standing below, and like most good lieutenants, his pistol was here and his rifle's on his back. He's working his phone. And he's got his RTO, his radio operator, right there with him. And he had two gun trucks pre-positioned on this particular patrol for this very anticipated type of threat. And he ordered the two gun trucks to fire. Gun trucks fired, killed two of the riders, one escaped, resulting in 2 counts and convictions for murder and 1 count of attempted murder. Lawrence got 20 years in the penitentiary. President Trump exercised his unfettered executive powers to say, you know what, Clint, I think you didn't get a fair shake. I'm going to send you home. And if I could just add a little,
Absolutely, absolutely,
I can put some
absolutely.
humanity on this. It's November 15th, 2019, right after Veterans Day. We're all out in Leavenworth, Kansas. And Leavenworth, Kansas, and there's an old town. There's not too much there except the federal civilian penitentiary and a giant army installation, and then all the supporting infrastructure with restaurants and pubs and things like that.
Right.
All that to say, we're sitting at lunch, and you could see this in episode 6 of the Stars production produced by Steven Soderbergh and Paul Pawlowski out of Hollywood, which won a Tribeca Film Festival award in New York. Episode 6 captures it live. We didn't plan this. We're sitting at lunch, and the telephone rings up 202 to me, and nothing else.
DC area code, right?
And that's the White House. And having worked in the White House under the administration of President Bush as his general counsel for the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, basically the personnel department for the federal government, except for CIA, DIA, DOD, more the civilian type work. And I said, gentlemen, this is the White House. And sure enough, you can see it on episode 6. It's 35 minutes. And if you don't have Stars and you can't stream it, it's $12.
Okay.
Or a couple cups
and well worth the watch.
Oh, I think so. And here's why. This is an amazing aspect of checks and balances in our constitutional system of government, where the Article 1 military tribunals can convict a man, and they withheld evidence that these men were terrorists on the motorcycle. We found that evidence. We caught the case on appeal, and had we not served in Afghanistan, we would not have known about the technology where we use biometrics for eyes, for fingerprints, for blood, for DNA. And these bomb makers, they leave their skin on wires because they don't wear gloves when they're twisting the wires to make the detonation plate, put it in the ground. So their skin's on it. So whether we come across a bomb and it's not gone off yet, we'll defuse it and conduct what's called a sensitive site exploitation. Basically a forensic crime scene.
Right. Yeah. Get some DNA off of it.
And then we'll send it up to a giant database. It is a giant database developed by the Army, and now it's multinational.
So you get the phone call, area code 202.
Right. And so come back, and it's Mr. Maher. And I said, yeah, this is he. And I'm going to paraphrase because you can see what I actually said.
Yeah, right.
And sure enough, this is the White House calling. Do you have the telephone number for Clint Lawrence? And I said, well, he's in the penitentiary.
Yeah.
By the way, President Trump's penitentiary.
Yeah.
I said, well, I'll get it for you. Right. So in any event, that's what happened. And so later on that day, 10:30 at night, none of us were dolled up in court attire or professional attire. We had been in Leavenworth for about a week in a war room in a local hotel, setting up everything and working the phones, doing everything we can to keep pushing. The idea being there's always something you can be doing. And we had some good information from New York and Washington and Louisiana. And I've got to say, Congressman Garrett Graves.
Garrett Graves, the rock star, right?
Oh, carried the day. And I don't want to leave anybody out. And I'm terribly sorry. The Louisiana delegation was magnificent, how they went to bat. And there's actually a beautiful picture, if I may, of Congressman Garrett Graves on Air Force One calling Anna Lawrence to say, Anna, President's going to turn your boy loose. Let him out of the hoosgow and send him home. You ready for that? Well, sure enough, 10:30 at night, we walk into the penitentiary, into the warden's office, and we're in blue jeans and boots and sweatshirts and top coats because it's freezing in November in the Missouri Prairie and the Kansas Prairie. And I got to say this. And I said this at the Cajun Dome in Lafayette earlier this year. And I brought in his dress blues, too. And I said, I'm not working this guy out as a perp. So some team members and I, Bull Gerfine was there, and some other fellas, Terry Buckler, a Green Beret from Vietnam, who was on the Son Toi raid to free American prisoners. We're all there, and I got to speak, and I got to say to the warden, Warden, Colonel 06, female, really nice lady, professional MP, we're here to pick up Lieutenant Lawrence, 82nd Airborne Division, United States Army. And she said, excuse me, you mean inmate Lawrence? Well, I said, no, ma'am. I mean, First Lieutenant Lawrence, United States Army, 82nd Airborne Division. We'd like him, please. Here's his uniform. We'd like him to change into that. And this happened. This is not on the Stars because they couldn't come into prison with us.
Right.
And that was by whose order? And Bill, I got to say, by order of the President of the United States, bring him to me. Whoa. Well, the proverbial Shaitan Tiffany cufflinks happened. And very professional, very good people, squared him away. We got him into a vehicle caravan. And so if you could picture the black, it's almost 11:30 at night now, along the Missouri River in the dark, caravan going through nowhere. All you see is the headlights. Come off post, drive across the street to the hotel, and all of his family and friends are there from Texas. And that's
Oh, wow.
depicted in stars. And I got to drive that young guy, that Lieutenant 82nd Airborne, up to the door, get out of the car, and just get out of the way.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah,
That
and
is
it's
a
quite something. And that's how I met the Santucci family. So you can see how getting
you
behind a Lawrence case, you can generate a lot of public opinion in favor of Clinton. And we had hundreds of thousands of petitions to the White House and to the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of the Army. So by and through that, a sexual assault case came. And that sexual assault case is Anthony Santucci. And I was skeptical in the beginning, but because after having practiced at the time about 20 years, I've been representing the family for about 5 years now through this appellate fight. Um, who gets behind sexual assault, right? Nobody
yeah.
wants to get behind someone who's doing those kinds of things. How do you generate a moral superiority and condemnation and momentum and support if someone hurts someone in that very, very vulnerable place? Well, I had two requirements. I said, I want to meet him and I want to read the record of trial. The record of trial, Bill, is a heartbreaker. I don't think, and you don't have to be a lawyer for this, and I mean that. I don't mean that in any other way. Anthony got on the stand and defended himself under oath, and there were 13 points of evidence that Anthony raised under oath in his own defense to say the intimacy that was shared that night near Fort Polk, Louisiana, at a particular bar, right off post, where an older lady, he was 21, she was 28. She had a C-section, had just delivered her fourth baby, bought him drinks at the bar. There's pictures of them dirty dancing. And this lady, this is the testimony at trial. Uh, the testimony was she asked me to come back to my place and quote unquote play. And they got back to his place, his apartment off post. And they had, according to Anthony, consensual intimacy. And then from there, after it was over, Anthony asked this married woman with 4 children, do you have your phone number? I'd like to call you if you want to start something with me. And this lady said, no, my husband's going to find out. So no, darling, and kisses him. Now, I don't know about you, Bill. Who kisses their rapist? Goodbye.
Right, exactly.
And then here's what was really disturbing to me. That is the lady, after she gets home at wee hours of the morning, sets her clothes on fire on the lawn and gets herself to the emergency room looking for the morning after pill, declines a rape kit and says, the morning after pill, I can't have another baby. I just have 4. I don't want another one. So they administer the morning after pill. And then after that is when she claims rape because her husband particularly found out, is what we think. All of that to say, not a bad person for making a false allegation. Yeah.
Right.
So we looked into it. Then I met Anthony. And then Anthony in the penitentiary. And then Anthony's mother and father, Bill and Donna, on their own dime, flew out to Chicago to visit with me. And at no cost to the family, I reviewed the record of trial, my team and I, and we said, we got to get behind this guy. Here's why. At the closing of the case, and not to sound too legalistic, at the closing of the case, both prosecution and defense have presented their evidence. We're about to go into closing arguments. The jury's in the deliberation room. This hearing is outside the presence of the members of the panel. And the defense counsel says, Judge, I want the mistake of fact instruction issued. And what that means is if Anthony truly believed that this woman consented to intimacy with him, he can go home. He's not guilty. That's it. That's why. And that instruction can only be issued if there's evidence entered into the trial through Anthony or other documentary evidence,
Right.
and even this lady's evidence. And yeah, I was there. Yeah, this happened. Corroborating certain things. The judge should have issued that instruction. So now we have an underinformed and misinformed jury not knowing they could send this young man home. That is constitutional error. On top of that, another problem with the Santucci case was you meet Anthony, guess what? First thing I did when I took the case, we put him on what's called a post-sentencing polygraph exam
Okay.
and asked him the tough questions. Who is she? Did you do it? All of that. He passed. no detection of deception. Now, we all know that polygraph exams are not admissible in a trial, but before trial, counsel could have used that to say, prosecution, you got the wrong guy. You
Right,
go,
exactly.
you go ahead and box him yourself. Box him, meaning the vernacular for a polygraph exam. And then on top of that, in the post-trial stage where we are, when we're looking for appeal in the courts, we're looking for parole every year, and we're also trying to get executive clemency from the previous administration. We think the odds are slim to none, and Slim just left town, that this administration is going to do anything for our clients. But being that aside, we're still pushing forward on all three fronts. With that said, having met the man, the past polygraph exam, our clinical psychologist examined Anthony, and when you meet him, you're like, no way. He says, John, we had consensual sex. And I say, but for the grace of God, there go I. This could be a college campus anywhere in the United States.
Right,
And that's
exactly.
not rape.
But you know
And
what
he
though,
didn't get a
John?
fair trial.
We interrupted for one
The
second.
worst part.
But
I'm
what's
sorry,
that?
after you, sir.
No, no, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sure.
No,
I said, sure.
oh yeah.
No, I
So
was going to say the worst part, Billy. It gets worse.
than that. It gets worse than
Yes,
that.
it gets worse.
Well, and
Yes,
I
sir.
know
And here,
because I know
why.
the story with Donna, and we'll go back to this because there's like a whole bunch of cases, not only like this, but on the sexual assault side, but also on the battlefield side that you're covering. But when it comes to sexual assault, it was hard for me to do an interview. I told you off air about that, and I want my audience to hear this too, because I think it's really important for this reason. It's really hard to cover sexual assault because you don't want to give anybody the chance to escape from something that they might have done on purpose. And I say might because of the evidence that shows that that Santucci, was innocent. That being said, the other reason I want to cover this on some of my shows is because I think this also helps victims of sexual assault. Because if it's more clear, if the boundaries are made more clear, and sometimes through court hearings like this, where the boundaries are made more clear, it may be able to help future victims or future people from being a victim in a case, because like in the case of Santucci, there's details that are coming out that may give women more, how should I say, give them more things to look out for.
Right.
That
better
if they're,
armed.
what's that?
Better prepared.
It helps them be better prepared. That maybe there are people who have more, nefarious plans. And when a woman hears these cases, they become better armed, if you will, in protection. So in a roundabout way, I think by talking about it, we not only expose the sins against our veterans when they're innocent, but we also help other potential victims from this happening to. Does it make sense?
I couldn't agree with you more, Bill. And that's the thing. If I could comment in light of yours, yes. Bringing awareness to sexual assault, who can possibly denigrate that or get against it? I, for one, can't. But here's the legal challenge. To put this into the legal box, Anthony's case is a result of what's called the SHARP program. And SHARP is the acronym for the Army's Sexual Harassment Assault Response Prevention Program. And the challenges there are, prior to this program, which had a noble and laudable goal of correcting for sweeping things under the rug in the past, where true offenders and were allowed to escape and victims never received vindication nor justice. That is a laudable goal. The challenge with this program, though, that Congress ordered and the president signed into law in the National Defense Authorization Act of, 2010, I forget off the top of my head, but I can get it to you. Well, I believe in practice that laudable goal is not being achieved. And here's why. The pendulum has swung too far past correction. And now we are affronting in Anthony's case, the presumption of innocence is reversed. The sacrosanct American constitutional, traditional common law values of our people on which this country has been founded are not observed here. And because Anthony was presumed guilty upon accusation. So much so that the victim under this program gets a special victim counsel. She is entitled to be a special victim. She's entitled not to cooperate with defense counsel ahead of time before trial and give a statement or an interview, which to me, well, due process, you have to have access to witnesses, especially the main person.
So you're bringing up two good important points, I think.
Yes, sir.
One is that our military veterans are not getting the same justice system in being a veteran or being in the military as they would being a civilian. And
Agreed.
not that we should give them better or more rights than civilians,
But
but our
equal.
veterans deserve at least the same legal process that they are defending by putting their name on the line or putting their life on the line by writing a check to the United States, payable to the United States of America. Right. They are putting their name on the line to defend our Constitution and our rights, but they're not getting those same rights as the citizens that they're protecting. I think that's one important point that you bring up. And then and then the other one, before I forget it, is that I forget the bill or the legislation that you mentioned that was gonna help sexual assault victims more.
Right.
That movement that came about, when you said the pendulum swung, you made a point that it swung beyond rights and became a narrative to make a point for the government and the politicians to say, see, we solved the problem, when instead of solving the problems, they swung the pendulum so far, they created more problems. So now not only are innocent people getting locked up, but it's going to create more problems for victims later, and more victims later, I think, in the process. It's the unintended consequences of government intervention.
And Bill, I couldn't agree with you more. If I could add to that or compliment,
Absolutely.
you said it so perfectly, if I may say so. But just from a practical standpoint, to add some specificity to Anthony's case, this SHARP program with this laudable goal, noble, love it.
That's the SHARP program, right?
Right, the SHARP program. It's noble in its idea. It's flawed and counterproductive in its execution. Here's another reason why, with regard to Anthony Santucci, very rarely are you going to get a guy in defense or a gal on defense who's innocent. You're usually trying to knock away what the government can prove. In Anthony's case, and what I mean by that is there's a difference between I'm innocent, meaning I didn't do it, or not guilty, meaning the government can't prove it. Those are differences. Anthony, in my estimation, is innocent, and the evidence speaks overwhelmingly to it. Beyond that, not only did he not get a fair trial by virtue of the mistake of fact instruction never making it to that jury of good people who could have said, we can send him home. If he thought it was consensual, send him home. That's one mistake. Another mistake, which to me, no one gets out of law school. All right. I went to law school. I graduated in 96, 100 years ago, back when they said 19 before 20, right? So all of that, my professors wouldn't let me out. If in a criminal trial, I wrote on my exam, what is the standard of proof to convict an American who is presumed innocent under the Constitution? If I wrote preponderance of the evidence, which is what the jury voted in this case and what the jury was instructed by the judge and what the prosecutor used in his closing argument to say, not guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. But you can vote, guess what? If it's a little bit more. And in our papers, you could read it, Bill, and please, share them as widely as you like with your listenership and viewership. The idea there, wait, a civil trial is a preponderance of the evidence, and that's where parties are suing each other over a private dispute. This is a public trial where the people of the United States are coming after a presumed innocent American citizen and an American soldier, and you're telling the jury to go in the deliberation room. If you guys think preponderance of the evidence, he did it, you can convict.
Right.
And the prosecutor took that and used it in the prosecutor's closing statement. So I don't want to say that animal from Australia that hops around on two legs and has a baby in its pouch kind of court.
Yeah.
But come on.
I can put that. But see, these are things that we're bringing up because, like when I said at first, it was hard for me to interview people about these types of cases. When I really thought about it, and I looked at the government intervention, like you said, in the SHARP's program.
Yes, sir.
When I looked at that, at how the pendulum's swinging and the unintended consequences, and I said, yes, this might be noble in putting some of the bad people away, the unintended consequences are going to be that there's a lot of victims that don't get justice, because when you skew justice in this way, you not only skew it against innocent people, you skew it against victims at the same time.
And
And
no one comes away better for it.
yeah, exactly. But when you look at the raw justice system that we have in America, sure, there's mistakes and there's people that go away that are innocent, and good people that get away, or bad people that get away too. But there's less of it because the system is more blind, I guess. I'm not an attorney, so I don't know the right way to say it, but I get the gist of it. So
And you know what, Bill? I don't think, you don't need to be an attorney. This is stuff that all of us in our neighborhoods and communities, if we were in the jury pool together, the panel, if you will, regular folks. But the difference is in Louisiana or here in Illinois or in Washington or in Ohio or wherever, in state courts and federal civilian courts, that jury is going to be your people from your neighborhood, your zip codes usually.
right.
Well, in this case, the commanding general picks the jury. And that entire jury has had what's called sharp training. And that entire jury has to sign off every year on their annual sharp training. Special victim prosecutor. The prosecutor can't ask any questions of the main witness against your client before trial. There are certain things that happen, the dynamic, the jury's sitting there trained. We got to stop sexual assault. The commanding general sent this guy to trial. Oh my gosh, my boss, who's the commanding general, sent this guy to trial. Therefore, he's probably guilty. After all, the boss wants this.
So that's an amazing way to put it. It was explained to me before, similar to that, but you just were more succinct about it and more direct about it. And it's almost, in my opinion, as if the what do they call that? The benefit of the doubt, instead of going to, or what's that called in legal terms? The benefit of the doubt.
A reasonable inference. Inference is drawn in favor
Reasonable doubt.
Right.
So the reasonable doubt, instead of being granted to the accused, reasonable doubt went to the accuser in this case.
Yes. The accuser, even worse, if you ask me. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart as a fair jurist, someone working a problem who wants to solve a problem in the larger picture, not only for Anthony and Richard Camacho and Andy Condon, and for the Free Our Warriors organization, a nonprofit headed up by Bill and Donna Santucci in Canfield, Ohio, not only to solve this problem, but here's the thing. In a larger sense, we, like you mentioned, victims, the accused, and the people we're supposed to protect in a larger sense, we're all being disserved by not following what we proclaim to be the rule of law. And a perp, Bill, a street thug, rapist, sexual assaulter, child molester in the civilian side of the house has far more protections and is going to get a better share or better shake than a military person who comes before military justice officials in today's climate. That's because of the SHARP program.
And before we switch to another battlefield story, sure, I want to talk a little bit. I want to say some things about you to kind of connect some dots. I often, when I hear people talking, I also try to listen to my audience, in the back of my head from the past, from past, comments to connect some dots. So you went to law school, then joined the military, and you served in Afghanistan, and then you went to work for the prosecution side, or when you went to work for the government. Were you on the prosecution side? Is that what I heard earlier in the beginning of the podcast? That when you were talking about bringing people to court, were you on the prosecution side at that point?
Yes, Bill, and thank you for the clarification, and my apologies if I didn't.
Oh no, we were getting off on some good tangents there.
All right. It's a great discussion. I'm very happy to be part of it. Yes, I graduated in '96. I was number 3 in my class, magna cum laude, and there was numbers of options. But in that year, I knew in my heart and my soul that I wanted to serve, I wanted to see the world, and I wanted to try cases early in my career because that was resonating with me at the time as a 25-year-old law school graduate. Graduated law school, commissioned a first lieutenant in the Army, active duty after training in Charlottesville, Virginia, and at Fort Lee in Petersburg, Virginia, deployed and was assigned to the 1st Infantry Division forward in Germany, in Bamberg and Würzburg and Grafenwehr and Schweinfurt and Hohenfels, and tried 42 cases to verdict there. And that's when I was a prosecutor. And the Army fulfilled those three desires. I mean, they commissioned me an officer, they sent me overseas, and I was trying cases within 6 months. Woefully underqualified. Thank God.
So let
But,
me ask you. So let me say this: is the reason I brought that back up. So you saw the other side.
oh yes, sir. And you don't.
You saw the top brass
They were my
and maybe
clients.
what's that?
They were my clients.
Well,
If I
well.
could jump in right there, Bill, I'm sorry. I would never speak over you.
Oh
But
no, no, no,
like,
no.
I
You're good.
might forget this one too. The clients that I had as a 26-year-old captain in the active duty side of the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, I had a 1-star. And here are my clients: the Assistant Division Commander for Maneuver and his Sergeant Major. Then I had 3 brigade commanders, which are colonels, full birds, 3 brigade commanders and their sergeants major. Then I had 7 battalion commanders and their first sergeants. Then I had 36 companies and batteries, companies being rifle outfits usually, and batteries being artillery. 36 captains and their first sergeants. So the day in Bamberg, Germany, which was an old infantry barracks that the Wehrmacht actually occupied, all these guys and gals are coming in saying, what do I do with this guy? What about this? What about that? So you learn that of the 42 cases we took to trial, Bill, we probably could have taken 242. But no, we had that training to wear the white hat first.
Yeah.
Right. Are you guys following the evidence, or you just want this guy out of your unit? We have to follow the evidence. This is you want to go criminal on this guy?
But at the same time, you probably were getting the how shall
Inside
I say?
dope.
What's that?
The inside dope.
Yeah, the inside dope, but you're probably getting top brass saying, on the other side, we need this guy prosecuted, or
Right.
this needs to happen.
Yeah.
So you saw the side of the government, going after people to make a point, maybe, or for even promotions.
I saw that, and I'm very happy to report that I did not support it and get behind it.
Right.
And I did do my best as a junior captain to speak truth to power and say,
But
you know what, I don't think this is right, and here's why. And
But
so,
my point is, so when you went on to the defense side, you hear later now you're taking these veterans on the defense side. You've got a lot of your very unique experience that qualifies you in this arena because one, you served as an attorney, you served from the other side, the prosecution side. And so now you're on the defense side and you're patriotic. You love this country. You've served and you see the injustices that are being done not only to our military, but the injustices being done to our justice system.
right.
Both in the military and out of the military. And the inequality of them goes against the grain of what our government is always trying to preach with equality.
You got it, Bill. Thank you, sir. I couldn't have said it better. And one thing I think a lot of the American public might not understand, and forgive me, sir, if I'm being too broad of a statement.
Oh, no, absolutely. Go
I
ahead.
think this is a dynamic at play, in effect, and that is, certain polls and surveys come out and say, what institution in the United States do you trust the most? And people are going to say, my doctor. The military always ranks way up there that we trust the United States military, and I do. I grew up in the military, 24 years, lieutenant colonel, still
great institution. I agree 100%.
Well, yes, sir. I cannot decry it. The challenge, though, is in the civilian side, the judge before whom you and your client appear is a jurist. That person has been through hundreds, if not, thousands of trials and hearings over a 25-year career before he or she is appointed nominated by senators and appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate. For the federal side, state side, they're usually elected. But these people have devoted themselves to the law. They are not only broad, but they're deep in this area. The challenge that a lot of folks don't realize about the military is the officers who serve as trial judges and appellate judges are very good people, very respectable people, some of my best friends with whom I've served in various places and still to this day wish each other happy holidays and get together every now and then. But they're military officers first. They're managing their own careers first.
Right.
They're in a hierarchical chain of command first. They're what they want to get. Even if you make 05 lieutenant colonel or 06 full bird colonel, you still want to run that out to your 30-year retirement.
Right.
Maximize your retirement. And you want the next assignment. You want the best school. You want the White House position. You want a Georgetown fellowship. You want the Defense Intelligence Agency. You want CIA. You want placements like that. So you're still managing your career. You're not focusing exclusively in those 25 years on being a jurist. Instead, you're a military officer first. And that to me is something that should be addressed a little bit, especially with this recent legislation about creating a new prosecution command. I think there's further work to be done to have jurists looked at. Although they're fine and mean well, they're in silos. They've not practiced in a county prosecutor's office. They've not practiced in a private law firm. They've not taught the law in private institutions. They haven't gone on to start companies and then be sued or sue people over business disputes. Siloed. Very good at what they do, but not an Article 3 jurist on the federal side who's devoted his or her life to this and not being distracted. You're on the law. Instead, military officers managing careers first.
I hear what you're saying. The military officers want to have their surroundings pristine, so so they're probably a little bit more eager to prosecute our military personnel to keep their surroundings pristine, to, like you said, so they can keep their 06 for their 30 years, or they can advance on to get their 1 star or whatever the case may be. But like we're pointing out, as this happens, the road to hell is paved with what? So exactly. Right? And so it's a shame though that our military is facing this. But before we talk about one or two of your other cases, I want to talk about amnesty.
Sure.
I've been told, and I've heard from talking to you and talking to other people, that you know a lot about the history of amnesty in our country for our veterans, which I think is important to bring up and important to talk about. Not that it's blanket amnesty is the best thing in some people's opinions, but I think it's important for our military and the protection of our military. What's your opinion on that? What do you have to say about that?
Well, thank you, Bill. And I think the first place to start would be, what is amnesty? And amnesty is a form of executive, meaning governmental relief. Amnesty is a general grant to say, Clint Lawrence, you get an individual pardon. 15 Clint Lawrences, you get amnesty. And so by an example of that, the reason being is the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan after 21 years are gone now. They're done. They're in the rearview mirror. But we're releasing Taliban back to the battlefield. We're releasing people from Guantanamo Bay. We're sending people back from our secure sites back to the battlefield, putting them back in circulation. So they're doing their things. No wonder ISIS is rising. No wonder the Taliban took over. Fine. All that to say, our guys are still sitting in prison. The war's over. Much like President Ford, who caught such chastisement and criticism for having pardoned President Nixon. He didn't pardon President Nixon, and I think President Ford, I would never presume, if I were ever a part of the advising of what to say, but I would have said something along these lines. And this is with the benefit of Monday morning quarterbacking. Sir, you can't go out there and say you're letting President Nixon go. Here's what you have to say. We've got to bind up the nation's wounds after Watergate. That is over. We can't keep going backwards. We have to look down and at the horizon, up and out, not behind us. So we have to get on with things. Dating back to President Washington, all the way through the presidential administrations, up into Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan. No matter what your partisanship was or party or the evolution of the different parties throughout our country's history, there has been amnesty granted. For example, the Whiskey Rebellion. A lot of the Whiskey Rebellions, they were granted amnesty by President Washington because he said, you know what? I respect my citizens. You can take up arms. You can rebel against your government. You can do it peaceably because that's part of your constitutional right as an American. And then President Washington sat back with his advisors and said, you know what? I'm not letting these people go. I want to bind up the nation's wounds. And I believe it to be the benefit of the country and this nation to put that behind us. So having the agitation and all the focus and energy and the buzz about these certain issues, put it away. Applied here. I mean, President Carter, President Carter on the draft dodgers, President Ford, an executive grant of clemency from anybody who refused to go to the draft. President Carter, you went to Canada, you can come back. Reason being, we may not agree with that decision, but these men, cloaked in that authority, were thinking about the future. They weren't thinking about these people should pay. Instead, they're saying, what is the betterment of my countrymen? What is for the betterment of this nation? What does this nation look like in 5, 10, 20 years from now? That's the focus of amnesty. You do it to be altruistic. You do it to correct for injustices. And you also do it for mercy. The Federalist Papers, Hamilton and a couple of other writers, they write about why the pardon power is so important for an executive, a governor for a state, and the president for federal offenses. To say, I'm going to wipe this out. And any number of reasons can form the rationale, but amnesty is what's before our Congress right now, and what the Justice for Warriors Caucus under Representative Louis Gohmert out of Texas is leading, and headed up by a wonderful former U.S. Army Sergeant, Derek Miller, who is the main point of contact for the Justice for Warriors Caucus. Works hand in glove with Donna and Bill Santucci with freeourwarriors.org. And on top of that, the idea is to make sure that the decision is made in a scale to affect a class of people so we can turn the corner, put it in the rearview mirror, and get on with the country's business.
I love how you said that, and I respect it completely, because I've heard, the World War II veterans were part had amnesty. World War I had
Vietnam.
But yeah, Vietnam, and I look at it like this. While you could individually say, well, this veteran or this military person in combat went off the rails and was, cut an ear off, or whatever the case was, where some of these things were getting accused of, or this military person was overzealous, in his actions.
Prosecutors were overzealous.
Well, exactly. That's what we found, that again, the road to hell, pay with good intentions. They're trying to correct wrongs, but the pendulum swings, way too far the other way.
I love how you say it.
With that,
I love how you said it.
They're exactly right. Kindred spirits here on this, But the way I look at it too is, these people were, because their hearts were bad as to why they did some of these actions. These are men that signed their name for their country, wrote that check with no cash value to their country for their lives to defend our freedoms. And they were put in unusual circumstances that only the smallest percentage of humans ever see. And they were put into circumstances and reacted in a human way under conditions that they were never trained for. You can go through boot camp. You're never trained for what you're going to actually see when you pull that trigger or you're being attacked. So amnesty, the reason why I think amnesty is good for these people is because it's not, criminals here that are killing people, drug dealing, those guys usually have bad hearts. They usually have bad hearts and go into a situation because they have bad intentions.
Right.
These military people,
they want to do bad, right?
They want to do harm. These military people that are that sign their name for their love of country, love of family, love of our Constitution, goes into battle and gets put into unforeseen circumstances, and they have to react in a human way that they were trained for. Amnesty, I think, applies to them in more than anybody else in this world. But if anybody deserves amnesty, it's these gentlemen. And I think it would solve a lot of problems because, like you said, now you've got all these individual stories of our military personnel that are locked up. And as we've talked about for, overzealous, about overzealous prosecutor, or to have the perception for an elected official or somebody that our military is officially woke or operating in a woke way, whatever the case may be. Amnesty, I think, would not only bring more people in our country together, it would strengthen our military. But I think, again, just like the sexual assault thing, it helps victims, not because their air quote, their perpetrator got set free. And I'm not saying that amnesty applying to them is what we're talking about in this case, applying to the sexual assault people as much as the war crimes. Right. But
agreed,
when you bring, what's that?
I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to interrupt. It's an important between crimes in combat and then sexual assault. I think
the distinction, the amnesty applies to crimes in combat. And thank you for saying that. Again, I want to reemphasize that. So I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Good teamwork there. But when you do stuff like that, you bring a healing, I believe, that
Right.
helps victims. And
Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address, Bill. And one need look no further for the sentiment I think you're communicating. And again, I'm terribly sorry to cut you off.
no, you, I
After
love what you're
the
saying.
transition,
Yeah,
if we were sitting together, I
yeah.
would talk over you. I'm terribly sorry. I apologize.
No apologies needed. I love what you're saying.
Well, what did Abraham Lincoln say in his second inaugural address in 1864, when the nation was still at the pivotal point of whether or not we're going to be two nations or separate individual states becoming nations instead of one union? However you want to characterize the issues that brought us to what some people say the American Civil War and others say the Second American Revolution, was the whole idea that Abraham Lincoln said, we're going to bind up the nation's wounds. We're going to help the veteran. We're going to secure the safety of his widow and his orphan with malice towards none and charity toward all. That's the spirit of executive amnesty. And President Grant, strike that, President Johnson, when he inherited the White House from President Lincoln after having been assassinated, President Johnson, clemency and amnesty to all former federal Confederates, to include federal officers, to include federal elected officials in the Confederacy. Blanket grant of amnesty, like you said, bind up the nation's wounds, put the ointment on it. We're together, we're Americans, and we're all going together in our union. So
Absolutely.
I think you say it beautifully. And again, I think those words are more than something we had to learn in civics class from the second inaugural address. With charity towards all and with malice towards none and
Yeah.
charity towards all.
I love that. But
Oh,
I think it's one of those,
now. Jeez.
yeah, wow.
I
Boy,
can
you're
use
good.
clarity.
You're good, John.
I get enough malice around here, man.
Yeah,
Give me some
right.
clarity.
Exactly. And that's why I think, like we've talked about, I think that's so important. And I don't understand why they're not doing it for the Afghan or the Iraqi war right now, because
I
now
can answer that.
what's that?
I can answer that.
Why is that?
It's not politically expedient at this point. It's not the base that the present party in power will be able to support. Those decisions are not inconsistent with any campaign promise or platform on which this present administration has run. If you look back at some of our papers we sent into to President Trump for Lieutenant Lawrence from 82nd Airborne and from Dustin Hurd, who was also pardoned a year later, pursuant to a lot of our team efforts by President Trump. Combat Marine, went back as a Blackwater security agent running PSDs, Protective Services Detail, escorting American diplomats through war-torn central Baghdad, got into a gunfight in 2007 in a 4-vehicle convoy in Nizer Square, shot the heck out of everything, and he, as a civilian, went away for 33 years. One of his dear friends, Nick Slatton, Raven 2-3.
Right.
The 4 guys that went away, the Raven 2-3 guys. Dustin Hurd is our client. We were able to secure his pardon. You would not believe how the administration at the time, and again, I really don't want to disparage anybody. I'm talking about practicalities of representing a legal client before an executive administrator who has the power of the quill,
right?
Who can let your guy go. So you got to get yourself in that box.
Exactly.
So you got to really make sure you know what you're doing. And we don't have those signals from this administration. Our letters to President Trump were these. Mr. Trump, you ran on a platform of correcting the failings of the previous administration. Here's one way you can do that. And that is by issuing an immediate, full, and fair unconditional pardon to Lieutenant Lawrence for the following umpteen reasons, not the least of which is the Judge Advocate General of the Army, the senior most uniformed military officer, and this is all in our public papers, said to Congressman Garrett Graves of the good state of Louisiana, you don't want to get near this case, Garrett. This case is no good for you. And Garrett Graves was kind enough to report that back to us, and we made hay on it because you now have the senior most legal officer of the Army doing his job. He's protecting his client, which is the Army. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you cannot do that by using mistruths. You're bound by a duty of candor and your ethical canons to tell the truth, especially when that's an American soldier doing time in the shithouse, in the penitentiary, when he didn't do it. I would have given the order in Lawrence's case. Dustin Hurd, there's defensive gunshot wounds all over their vehicles. One of their vehicles was so shot up under fire, the men are laying down a wall of steel so the other troopers can go with the record hook it up and drag their vehicle out of there in the middle of a gunfight. Those three guys got 33 years. Do you know what the United States of America did to Dustin Hurd and Nick Slatton?
No.
Added a sentence enhancement to them for using automatic weapons in the commission of their felonies. The United States government contracted with Blackwater because of these men's combat expertise and capabilities and lethality with these weapons. And then we perverted the system and say you're going away for another umpteen years because you used an automatic weapon.
For using the weapons we gave you.
And if you didn't use those weapons, your package probably would have been killed. Because you guys did your duty and shot it out under fire, got the vehicle out, towed it out. I'll send you our papers, all public, towed it out. And then when you hear what then Vice President Biden and then Secretary of State Clinton, because we got their cables through Freedom of Information Act requests, we got the diplomatic cables, and they're all in our papers. And you cannot believe, well, Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State then, Hillary Clinton, and Vice President then, Joseph Biden, both emailing each other. Well, what do we do to prosecute these guys? Because originally, the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, sitting in Washington, D.C., wrote a 58-page opinion scolding the United States, saying, how dare you bring these men to trial? Dismiss the case. Then we have the cables between Baghdad, Washington, and back and forth from the highest levels of our government, NCA, National Command Authority, the Secretary of State and the Vice President saying, how do we appeal this? How do we get it before the right judge? How do we get it so they see it our way? And then you have Vice President Biden going with the president of Iraq on television. And you can look it up. You can Google it or YouTube it.
Exactly.
Our four guys, our combat soldiers and Marines, who are now professional private contractors, protecting packages, running and gunning is the vernacular.
And packages meaning people that are diplomats, humans.
Our American diplomats, right?
Our diplomats, right.
Right, roger that. And you have them, our senior leaders saying, we're going to sacrifice these guys in order to placate the Iraqis. And so those guys did what, 6-7 years. Dustin, I don't know where Nick spent his time. Dustin was in Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. That's no pleasant place.
No.
Oh my God.
Hopefully he made it out okay.
Oh, he's doing wonderfully. I'm very happy to report.
And I've heard this story before about Biden and Clinton doing that, behind the scenes. And if I remember correctly, they brought in a known terrorist, flew in a known terrorist
to the United States.
What? To the United States.
To Washington, D.C.
Terrorists can't fly in commercial jets unless they're put there by our American government, right?
You want to hear even worse?
What?
The case of United States versus Staff Sergeant Robert Bales. Client we argued the case before the U.S. Court of Appeals in the 10th Circuit in Denver, Colorado, September 20th, 2021. We're waiting decision on it. Bales is a tough case. He pled guilty for having shot and killed 17 Afghan civilians. In the Panjwai district of Kandahar province, the neighboring province to Zare, where Lawrence did his thing. Bales did his thing in March. Lawrence did his thing in July. The two, it's like, across the street. It's Metairie and New Orleans. It's Lake Pontchartrain and New Orleans. It's right there. There it is.
Right.
Go there, right?
Yeah.
Well, sure enough, Bales pled guilty to save his life. What the United States did, and we didn't know. We caught the case on appeal again. They sought us out, and through a Freedom of Information Act request, the State Department and the United States Army released to us the records because we had been overseas in Afghanistan, and I had been the chief of contracts and fiscal law for General McChrystal and his staff for 13 months, signing all these travel orders, making sure all of Congress's money was appropriated and spent the way Congress wants it to be spent. So we knew the questions to ask. Where are the travel vouchers? Who signed it? Where are the credit cards? Where are the airline reservations? What are their visas? What are the aliases? What funding site did this come from?
Okay.
So we get all of this. At trial, they brought 13 Afghans from the Panjwai battlefield into the United States on commercial airliners, Delta Airlines, into Atlanta, from Atlanta to Seattle, Washington, because the trial was conducted at Joint Base Lewis McChord, formerly known as Fort Lewis, not Lewis McChord, Air Force now in the Army. Brought them in, held them out as simple tillers of the earth, farmers. Well, sure enough, our biometric research with those records, they came in under alias names, alias visas, lies. They were sent to not Chuck E. Cheese's, Papa Joe's. They were bought prayer rugs, Korans, blue jeans. And there's some information in there that somebody went to SeaWorld. So all that to say, we sent special operators, and here it is, Bill. I'm sorry to wax.
Oh no, yeah.
When you bring known terrorists into the United States and put known bomb makers, and I'm not being sensational, it's in our public papers, and I argued it to the
Public
federal
record.
Yes, sir. And I argued to the court, when you put known bomb makers, meaning they left their DNA or their fingerprints, either way, sorry about that. Either way, it's very acceptable evidence. And by
Right.
virtue of that, put him amongst the truly innocent, unknowing American flying public. You and me and our sons and daughters and our grandmas and grandpas all flying on Delta Airlines. Got it. Here's the ticket. Here's the boarding passes. Introduced it all.
You
Before the
sit right
Army.
next, right, and you're sitting right next to a guy that was making bombs just a couple months ago, or weeks ago, or days ago, who's on his way to testify against our American veteran that put his life on the line, his family's name on
42
the line,
months of
to
combat.
fight for our.
Sergeant in the infantry.
What's that?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Bill, but
No, go ahead.
42 months in combat, not combat like on a post and some rockets or mortars came in. We call it a FOBIT. You're on a FOB, a forward operating base. If you get
Right.
shelled, now you're in combat. Well, some would say, yeah, I shouldn't get shelled. It might be
Yeah.
combat. But
Yeah.
Bob's 42 months as a staff sergeant in the infantry. And as you know, as a veteran yourself, sir, that's up close and personal work. I mean, that's pistols, that's knives, that's punches,
Yeah.
that's using a shovel, that's whatever you got. Pick up a rock. And you're clearing rooms. You don't throw the grenade in the room, as you know. You bounce it off the walls so he can't catch it and throw it back at you.
Right, exactly.
And sure enough, quitted himself beautifully. Mefloquine is a whole nother story about a drug that the Army told him to take, which we believe caused him to act this way, to be such a complete departure from his previous acquittal of duty under fire. If you're going with Bales, you're probably going to go 4 combat tours, Iraq and Afghanistan. Long story short, flew these people in, lied about who they were, got fake visas, lied to the jury, didn't say that these are bomb makers.
Right.
One guy had a Taliban tattoo on his hand. Right there. Right there. Unmistakable evidence. And the judge won't let defense counsel cross-examine. Sir, what is that tattoo? Would you please hold it up? Your Honor, I would ask that the witness step off the bench and please approach the jury. Jury members, please take note. May you please take a picture? I'd like to move for admission. There it is. Now you got it. It's in. Defense didn't do that. Defense didn't find the bomb-making evidence that we found. Defense didn't find the fact that Bob Bales took mefloquine, was ordered to take mefloquine, and took it. And now the Army developed this drug previous to 1992 at Fort Bragg when a Special Forces soldier opened up on his own guys in a PT formation in the wee hours of the morning. Then you have the State Department, the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, and you have the Peace Corps, all taking this malaria drug, anti-malarial. Most people have taken doxycycline if you're going to a malaria place in the malaria time frame. Well, the Army said, we're going to take not doxycycline, you're going to take mefloquine, brand name Lariam. Today, that evidence, by and through the world's premier expert, Dr. Remington Nevin, former 82nd Airborne paratrooper, former command surgeon for the 82nd, for the 80 Deuce, gave up his career because he said to the Army, we can't keep giving this to our guys. Today, the medical science is unfolding that you have psychotic breaks, you are under persecutorial delusions, you see things that aren't there, and even soldiers who are not affected by that still have what's called mefloquine Mondays, because the Army's protocol to roll this thing out in the field was everybody gets online in formation in your morning report, you know, who's on sick bay, who's here, who's present, who's not accounted for, what's going on, who's killed, who's wounded, get the report, and then the medics will come through, drink it and drop it. Drink it and drop it. And then the guys would start hallucinating for the next few days, and they started to like it, saying, hey, mefloquine's cool. It's a break in insanity here, right? Well, now the medicine is even further unfolding through Dr. Nevin and his nonprofit that he's quit the Army, resigned his promising career as an Army paratrooper and surgeon, physician, to say no. And he started the Quinism Foundation, Quinism, in Vermont. And the Quinism Foundation, the name is for that class of drugs that form these problems, the psychotic delusions and the persecutorial delusions and the breaks from reality. Now the evidence is unfolding that it's actually eating brainstem tissue.
So we have I didn't interrupt you, but we have a couple things going on.
Yeah.
We've got good men being trained to kill, defend their country, thrown in the battle, being trained in battle, being having things thrown upon them that were never trained to be. Like as much as you can do military training, like I said earlier, as much military training as you can do, you're never trained for what you're going to actually see in real life, in really happening in real time. And good men with good hearts that are making decisions to save their life or who they're with. And then on top of that, you've got a drug that's becoming a known psychotic, I'll say, that's causing some problems. So you got another combination where the human mind is now trying to fight off not only the effects of a mind altering drug, but also the effects of the battlefield. And then when they get put into harm's way and they have to defend themselves, they're now being attacked by their own government who's bringing in terrorists. And this is all on fact to put them in jail. And we wonder why we need amnesty.
And you know what, Bill? You've said it beautifully. What is the movie about Operation Red Wings when the 4 Navy SEALs went into Afghanistan to take out a high-value target? They got in a gunfight and only one guy came out. I think it's Lone Survivor.
Oh, yeah, I saw that movie, right.
There's a pivotal scene in that movie when they're at the decision point that you're describing. All of your training, everything you know how to do, you're not trained to be a diplomat. You're not trained to have community engagements and key leader engagements. You're trained to stab someone in the face. You're trained to shoot them right in their face. Up close and personal, you're trained to cut their throat and throw a grenade at them.
Right.
And blow them up with mortars and shoot them with machine gun fire, direct fires, and indirect fires. You're not trained, like you said, to be a diplomat. Secondly, in that movie, there's a scene where the kid finds them stalking the target. They're all in their hideout. They were dropped, spent all night humping in, and now they're ready to go. The little kid comes up with some lambs and some goats, and the decision becomes, oh man. And then the little old man comes with him, if you remember the scene.
Right, exactly.
And the 4 of the guys get into a discussion. They say, hey man, if we shoot these guys, we're going to survive. We're getting out of here. Instead, if we let them go, they're going to go down and get those hundreds of guys, and they're going to beat feet up and chase us and kill us, which is what they did, except for one. But if you might recall the pivotal scene, man, if we kill these guys, we're going to Leavenworth.
Right, exactly.
On people's minds. That's in a Hollywood production, albeit with Mark Wahlberg and wonderful guys, Operation Red Wings. Man, oh man, to have that on your mind. Now, some people would say, why don't you just break their leg, gag them, and tie them to a tree? You could have done that. But no, these guys were inculcated with a counterproductive philosophy of nobody wants to commit murder. Every killing in combat is presumed lawful because it's by orders. And in this particular case, I think that hesitation, whose son or daughter is going to want to join? And whose mother or father is going to say, I think this is a fine opportunity for you, because if you get in a gunfight and in that split second make a decision that's wrong, years ago in Vietnam and Korea and the Second World War, we called that collateral damage.
Exactly.
War. Today it's murder. I don't know why. And I think it boils down to several factors. Placating our countries that we are sitting in their bedroom. We're sitting in their front yard. We have to placate them. So in any event, all of that to say, I think amnesty is very pivotal, timely. I am not optimistic, though, Bill, that this administration will be inclined. I think we need another administration to do it, who's more like Donald Trump called, President Trump and Vice President Pence called the USDB. Clint Lawrence was laying in his cell. Said, Lawrence, you got a call. Put him on. Stand by for the President of the United States. 14th things. Clint, hey, President Trump, I'm going to send you home, man. I think you got a raw deal. Okay, don't let me down. I'm going to pass the phone to Vice. Now, we FOIA'd the transcripts, and the United States is putting up a fight. Well, why? We want those transcripts. We know what Clint told us about those calls.
Exactly.
We want the transcripts. And then Vice President Pence, I don't know how they did a good cop, bad cop, yin yang. Vice President Lieutenant Lawrence, thank you very much for your service to the country, and we're all proud of you, and we're going to send you home because you did not get a fair trial. We're going to correct this injustice. Thank you. Merry Christmas. Bye. So sure enough, a few hours later, we're pulling them out of there. That's the kind of administration. And I do believe that President Trump and Vice President Pence, they made that decision against the great weight of career civilian politicians, and uniformed military personnel. We've also issued Freedom of Information Act requests asking for every murder board, presentation, slide, and transcripts of everyone who argued against Lawrence's pardon, because we want to know that. Because a
And
new administration is going to come, and we want to have those arguments in advance in order to defeat
already
him.
done. I love this. Well,
Yes, sir.
again, it's the unintended consequences. I get that there are top brass that wants everything to run perfectly and look shiny and and be just like your boots, polished and shiny so much that you can see yourself in your boots. They want the beds made perfectly. They
Oh,
want to be
yeah.
able to drop a quarter on
Nothing
it.
wrong with that, right?
Yeah, yeah, I get it. I get it. I get that, and I respect that our military wants everything to look perfect and nice. But at the same rate, the unintended consequences are that there's going to be some people that fall prey to those types of unintended consequences. And I have talked to a few of the people in the military that 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 are that have said, when you sign your name in the military, some people know that this may happen and you become a victim, but you're taking one for the team, for your country, so to
Mhm.
speak. And it
Mhm.
shouldn't be that way.
No,
If
sir.
we applied equal justice to our military people the same way we give it to our non-military people, I think we could solve both problems. Have men that have a clean and tidy military, while at the same time bringing pure justice to military people who put their name on the line for our country.
Thank you, Bill. And here's the thing: in court papers and in other presentations and talks, I've been on a panel. This point that you just made, I think, is so pivotal in the mindset of the American listenership and viewership. That being, the American soldier, the American warrior, does not want to commit murder. He or she wants to go overseas, do a very dangerous job, do it with honor, come home, and then spend the rest of their lives saying, "My God, man, I served my country. I did some dangerous stuff."
Standing up wearing their hats and at the VFW and everything. Before
And
I
they
ask,
just, oh, I'm sorry. And the point I was going to make is they, above any perp on the street, deserve a pristine trial for the Constitution, like you beautifully mentioned, that they walked into battle to protect and defend. They
before
deserve a trial.
before I ask you my last two easy questions, is
Well,
there
I hope they're easy.
anything?
They've been tough so far.
Oh, they're no, for you they're going to be easy. Some people
All right.
they're hard questions,
All right.
but is there anything that you can think of that if people want to get in touch with you,
Mhm.
or is there any kind of information that you want to get out that we can let people know about?
Yes, sir.
To keep up with you, I want to give you that opportunity, and then also know that when I post this video, post the podcast, I am going to be putting information that you want for people to either find you or how to get more information from you, or more importantly, get Anthony Santucci's book or get these books to find out more information. What's your there it is, the military rate. Yeah, Anthony Santucci. The really so what there we go. Where to get it right. So any final words for you before I ask you my last two easy questions?
Yes, Bill. And thank you so much for that. Here's how you can get involved. First of all, become informed. And how you become informed is listening to your program, listening to other similar programs who are putting out our points of view. And our points of view, indeed, are subjective. We represent a certain position, but I believe they're objective because it's red, white, and blue, man. We're not
Absolutely.
talking about partisanship here. We're talking
Right.
about the American warrior and the Constitution of the United States being applied to him or her.
Right.
So, first of all, get informed. Here's how you get informed. In addition to your program, you've United American Patriots. I think you've interviewed David Bulgorfine,
Oh,
Lieutenant,
Gerfin, right.
Harvard MBA and combat Marine, Mustang, enlisted man, went all the way up to Lieutenant Colonel, Congressional Liaison, and now he's done some great things with big companies. And he is the president of UnitedAmericanPatriots.org, which is a nonprofit whose mission statement is to protect and defend those wrongfully accused and or convicted of crimes in combat. Much of these cases, if not all of them, are discussed in full in our actual legal papers filed in court are up on that website, uap.org. Secondly, the freeourwarriors.org. That's Bill and Donna Santucci. So on the one hand, United American Patriots buttons up the crimes in combat. Free Our Warriors buttons up these sexual assaults, which are admittedly sensitive issues, But when the Constitution for the United States is absent without leave, and you're pulling good warriors off the line and taking them off like that,
Right.
you guys, we can't stand for it. So, freeourwarriors.org. On top of that, you could look at www.lawyersdefendingwarriors.com. And that's our law firm. That's Maher Legal Services. At which page you can look at all of our legal papers in the main cases that we have pending before the federal courts and before administrative agencies of the United States, those being the Army Clemency and Parole Board, as well as seeking freedom of information release records from the State Department, the Army, Department of Defense, what have you. And you're free to donate. Each of the organizations accepts nonprofit donations in support of furthering these efforts, and the ratios of donation to actual receipt by the beneficiary are all consistent with the nonprofit standards throughout the United States. These are reputable organizations. Well, it is now, since I'm no longer on the board of UAP, but I was, all kidding aside though. And also, please get involved and learn more about amnesty. Bill, I'd love to show you a slide deck we prepared for the convention at the Cajun Dome earlier this year in Lafayette. And it traces, it's about 5-6 slides, and it merely is informative for the layperson who wants to get to know about the history of amnesty and why it's particularly.
I'm going to get that slide presentation from you. I'll let you email that to me with all this other. If you want to send all the information you want to send me, if you want to email it to me, I'll start sharing it and putting it out there and really getting some word on it, because I agree with it.
Another person you got to have on, since you've asked, Fred Galvin, Major, United States Marine Corps.
I'll give me his information. I'll have him on.
He wrote a book, and it's a bestseller right now, called A Few Bad Men. And he talks about everything that you've articulated for the listenership and the viewership about pristine military officers managing careers. Everything's dress right, dress. I'm not going to make a tough decision. I'm going to let the lawyers do it, blah, blah, blah. Abdication of command authority to your lawyer rather than being a commander. He lays out the story of the very first MARSOC company, Marine Special Operations Command, very first company sent into Afghanistan. And I will use this, if anybody reads this, Fred Galvin is just a wonderful man, experienced, a true dedicated warrior and scholar, a gentleman. This book is a bestseller. He's all over the country doing it right now. And his MARSOC company was tossed out of Afghanistan by a commanding general at the time. And I won't say his name. But it's all over the book.
It's in the book.
So his title, A Few Bad Men, as you know, and just to be clear, the Marine Corps motto is not only Semper Fidelis, always faithful, but in the advertisement to recruit, it's A Few Good Men, or it was. That's why he changed the title, A Few Bad Men. And it's an incredibly good read. It's consistent with pointing out the various aspects of purported crimes in combat, and then the years of torture that Fred Galvin and his men had to go through to liberate themselves from prosecutorial overreach dictated by commanders trying to protect themselves rather than serve the mission and the organization.
Unbelievable. So that surmises everything we've just talked about, and I didn't even know it until the end. Now I'm gonna have to have him on the show too. I love it.
Oh, he's a wonderful guy too.
You're awesome.
Yeah, thank you, sir. You are too.
Where in our country, where are our freedoms most under attack?
I think freedom's under attack right now. January 6th, there's all kinds of issues there. Our firm has represented a couple right there. I think that some of the sentences that are coming out now, wherever you are on politics, we're talking about the law. Right. I think that dynamic right there, it's getting a lot of scrutiny. I'm on some of the email distro lists from all the defense counsel. So I'm not at liberty to disclose defense tactics because technically we're all working what's called the common interest purpose.
Right.
So we're all protected from attorney-client privilege in that, and we're also helping each other out as fellow attorneys. That's a tough one. There's a lot to sort out right there. Also under attack, if I ask my son or daughter to raise their right hand and go into combat for us, so you and I could have this conversation without people throwing bombs at us or blowing stuff up, why am I going to send my son or daughter in there if you're going to put them in prison if they make the wrong call?
Right.
We need to be able to stand up, and commanders, I encourage commanders not to abdicate your command authority provided to you by your commission and your appointment by the President of the United States, confirmed by the Senate, to lead America's young people into battle and home, and don't put them in prison unless you absolutely have to. Put the rapist who did it in prison. put the murderer who did it in prison. And if you do that, make sure you provide a constitutional, pristine trial for that American who's presumed innocent and that American who's a soldier.
Who gets the same justice system that he would get as a civilian.
He'd get a better deal in Lafayette or New Orleans than he would in the Army.
My last question for you: what
Yes, sir.
unites what you when you're feeling what your opinion? What unites us as Americans?
Our love of country and each other, our countrymen. My God, look what Louisiana did. Look what Ohio's doing. Look what Washington, D.C. and Virginia, look what Texas has done in some of these legal fights. And I have a perspective that is not widely known. When you have hundreds of thousands of people from across the United States and internationally sending petitions to whitehouse.org, literal, regular petitions with a check for $12 on it. Sorry, this is all I could spare, but I'm behind Lawrence. I'm behind Dustin Hurd. I'm behind Santucci. I want my soldiers to have a fair trial. I'm behind Fred Galvin. I'm behind Calvin Gibbs, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Army, doing life for 3 murders he didn't commit.
Free Calvin Gibbs.
Free Calvin Gibbs, a wonderful guy. He's a client too, a combat veteran. And if you want to be in close quarter combat, you want to be with Calvin Gibbs and you want to be with Bob Bales.
Because
they're probably coming home. We're getting out.
They're going to take care of you and take care of their country.
They're non-commissioned officers, and you and I both know that the military runs on your sergeants, and they're the best guys, man. 2 of the toughest men I've ever seen. Let me leave you with this, if we have to wrap up. Bob Bales, Staff Sergeant, United States Army, 42 months in close quarters combat, highly decorated. 4th tour of combat, he didn't want to go. He goes, I'm not right. So instead of being portrayed as a sick bay commando trying to dodge duty, how can you say this about this man who's already had 36 months of gunfights, which at 36 months is more combat than anybody in the Second World War had? Not that his fights were Iwo Jima or the Battle of the Bulge or the Ardennes. You know, those gunfights are Chateau Thierry in the First World War, the Big Red One. No, it was not, or Cantigny. But instead, clearing 1 room. I asked Bob, how many rooms you cleared? Johnny, I can't even imagine. Clearing 1. We'll put you in the hospital with a high blood pressure.
Right, exactly.
And here's where I was going with that. So picture this. As attorney, I could go into the penitentiary and meet with my client in attorney-client privilege quarters. So we go into the lawyer's office and we sit privileged. There's no monitoring, observing. We have the attorney-client privilege. I could bring my experts and my other lawyers and paralegals with me. Picture Bob Bales, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Army. Handcuffs, leg irons, waist cuffs to bring his hands in an orange jumpsuit, which means special detainee. Otherwise, general population wears chocolate brown, almost like UPS uniforms at the United States Disciplinary Barracks on Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. 2 soldiers that Bob Bales could probably break them in half. Their mama didn't even know they were in the Army. And they're in front of me, escorting Bob. I'm behind him in my business suit and my papers. You know, our meeting's done. They're taking Bob back to his cell. Looks over his shoulder, and this guy lets a tear out of his left eye. And he stops the 2 guys, and they stopped with him. They were escorting him. And he said, sir, everybody walked out. You walked in.
Wow.
And that's why you take the case. And I met his kids. They call him Daddy. And his wife moved from Washington to a location very near Fort Leavenworth to be near the penitentiary. So the children and he can all be together. And it's quite a story. And Carrie is a wonderful interview too. Carrie, Kari, we could talk offline, but if she wants to come on, she gave a beautiful speech as part of our efforts at the University of Chicago Law School a few years back. And she said, you know, as an Army wife, as an Army spouse, you know, you brace yourself when your man and your husband is an infantryman and he's over in combat. You brace yourself for them to come up the walk to the house because you're like, oh, shite. He got killed or he's captured or he's missing in action.
Right.
You don't expect him to say, we sent the Secretary of Defense, Leon Panetta's private jet to get him out of there, to haul him to the penitentiary. We need to get you off Fort Lewis because we're fearful that you might be attacked in reprisal. And she got the 2 little kids. What?
Right.
So, I mean, that's another story.
Wow. Yeah. Tell her I'd like to have her on.
We'll take care of that off air, sir.
John, I'm gonna wrap us up and put it
All right,
off air because we'll talk for a couple of minutes off air, and then you'll get to go have lunch, and I got another appointment too. But I want to thank you.
I'm gonna get myself a po' boy for sure now. Can I tell you a quick story about po' boys?
Yeah, absolutely. Go
Quick
for it.
story, and I hope it's on air.
Yeah, we're on air. We're still on air, right?
All right, so I flew down to New Orleans, my very dear friend of mine in childhood, and we're looking at Loyola. We're like, hey, let's explore. Let's go meet and visit the dean and look at the classrooms and see what packages are available and curriculum, just like a college visit, but a law school visit. So we fly back to Chicago, and my dad, who's now gone, picks my friend Rich and me up from the airport. And I got the New Orleans magazine that you get, at every hotel or right in front of the door of any restaurant. And I say, hey, Dad.
My dad used to work for that company publishing that magazine, by the way, but go ahead.
Outstanding. Plug for Dad.
Yeah.
I say, hey, Pops, I'm in the back seat, and he's driving. My friend's in the front seat. We're coming home from Midway Airport. And I said, Dad, any idea what a po' boy is? And without missing a beat, smoking a cigarette, looking at me right through the rearview mirror in the back seat. Yeah, po' boy is going to be you and Rich when you flunk out of that fancy school. True story. Yeah. Po' boy.
And little did you know that you'd be getting your fill of them when you were in New Orleans.
Oh man, I love them all too. Crawfish, especially shrimp. Shrimp's really the best one I think.
Oh yeah, that's my that's my Achilles heel on that one.
Yeah. Let's go to Cooter Brown's for some oysters.
We go to Cooter Brown's. We go to Camille Grill. But I gotta tell
Daiquiri
you,
Shack.
my favorite daiquiri shack. My favorite po' boy place, Bears Po' Boys, hands down.
Wait a minute, Bears?
Bears Po' Boys. Favorite restaurant. We'll go there and get a po' boy. There's another one uptown called Guy's Po' Boys.
Don't remember that.
Those are the two best po' boy places, in my opinion. And we'll talk about all the others. Actually, Parkview Historic Hotel is a great place to stay. And by the way, real quick, I'll mention. Have you done anything with Patriot Mobile yet?
No, sir, not yet.
Patriot Mobile is a sponsor of my show, and they believe in our first responders, our military, our veterans, our First Amendment, our Second Amendment, and they donate a portion of their proceeds to all the organizations that believe in the same.
Outstanding.
And if you switch to them, their coverage is the same or better. And you gotta catch them on there. And John, I gotta tell you, I've enjoyed our time together. This is amazing. And I got to tell you, I think this is going to be one of my favorite interviews. And
you say that to all the boys.
Well, actually, I always tell people they're in the top 3.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't want to know who the other 2 are.
Yeah, you don't know who the other 2 are.
It's been a pleasure, sir. I can't thank you enough. And I will get you those slides on amnesty straight away.
When I end the recording, we're going to stay on the line for just a minute here. And everybody else, please share the video, share the interview. If you watch the video, look up the podcast. If you listen to the podcast, find the video on Rumble. I'm on Rumble, William Wallace for America, Clout Hub, Wallace for America, because I had to shorten it up a little bit. Twitter, Wallace for the number 4 America. Instagram, William Wallace for America. Check out, I got different shows on all of them, depending on the links. Please share this one, because I think it's important not only for our veterans and for victims and for our country, because malice towards none,
charity towards all.
Charity towards all.
Bind up the nation's wounds.
Exactly. Bind up the nation's wounds. All right, guys. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Bill.